Well, good morning and welcome back today. This is going to be part two of Tamatha Latham's testimony, and I'm not going to take up much time here. We send out our email address and all every week, and if you want to find that, just pull up a program on YouTube with Defining Moments with Evangelist Lynn Taylor. But other than that, we're going to move on out of the way this morning and welcome Tamatha back to the mic and give her as much time as she needs to finish sharing her story with you and what God has done in her life. Tamatha, welcome back to Defining Moments today.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I appreciate being here and having the opportunity again to share my testimony. If everybody wouldn't mind this morning, I'd like to start with a prayer before I finish my story. So if we'll take just a moment and pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this day, and thank you so much for your many, many blessings. Thank you for each person that has joined Lynn's program and show this morning. And I just pray that they be touched and that you use me, that you speak through me, and that the message that you want out is spoken through me. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for giving Christ to save my life. And I pray that everyone has a blessed day. In Jesus' name, amen. As I was talking about last week, I've had some health issues and have had diabetes since I was 18 months old. And I had experienced a tornado, lived through a tornado in 2007, the day the children were killed in Enterprise. And then when we ended last week, I was talking about going into the hospital a year ago, this past April the 24th of 2013, and I ended discussing the morning after having fluid drawn from around my heart and lungs. That next morning, I woke up in a great deal of pain, and as you may or may not remember, my mom called, and I just asked her to get to the hospital. And they got to the hospital, they did a CT, and discovered that when they went in to draw the fluid from around my heart and lungs, that they had punctured my right lung, and I'd been on blood thinners for several days due to a blood clot in my arm. So I was literally bleeding to death, and my right lung wasn't about to explode. It was being crushed, and as I mentioned at the end of the program last week, I had been taken just outside of NICU and for observation, and my parents heard code blue NICU. I have no recollection of any of that. I didn't hear code blue. I wasn't hearing anything because I was not here. When I became aware of what was going on, I found myself, and it was like an old-fashioned water well. If you've ever seen the round brick wells that they had back in the 1800s. It was something like that, but it was large enough that I could spread my arms and make swimming motions. It was huge, and it was completely illuminated because it was a black onyx wall, and it had the most beautiful carvings that I've ever seen. It was just, they were all different designs. I can't describe any of them. I can't interpret any of them. The only thing that I really recognized was a rose, and it was just absolutely beautifully carved. But I focused on the rose because it was the one thing of this grand design that I could mentally comprehend, because the rest of it was just beyond comprehension. And I realized that I either had to come back or I was gone, and there was no in between. I was at a direct middle point, and it wasn't. I didn't have time to talk to God, but He allowed me to have to make the choice, to have the choice as to whether to come back, because I decided that I had to get back. And I tried swimming, and I didn't get scared until I realized that the swimming motions were completely fruitless, that I wasn't going anywhere, that it wasn't helping. Nothing I could do would help. It was just anything I tried to do was futile. And I realized it was mind over matter, and that I had just had to concentrate. And it took everything that I could do to concentrate, just to get back, get back, get back. That's all I could think, was just focus on the rows and think and will myself to go back into my body. And the doctors were just completely flabbergasted when I sat straight up in the bed. I came back. They hadn't had time. They'd called the code blue and were getting the resuscitation equipment, but I came back before they had a chance to get in with the machines to resuscitate me. And as I laid there, I was watching the doctors, and I was watching everybody in the room move around, and I wanted to go to sleep so bad. And I looked at one of the doctors, and this is written in the book. It's explained in the book as well. I'm giving a very similar, recounting the story very similarly at this point. But I looked at the doctor and I said, "I'm so sleepy." And he looked at me and said, "You can go to sleep." And I said, "No, I can't, because if I go back to sleep, I won't come back." And I laid there for a long time. Well, eventually I did go back to sleep. But without going into a tremendous amount of detail, I wound up having to go on a ventilator. And when they inserted the ventilator, I was laying there. I was dying. I knew that I was dying. The nurse told my daughter when she walked in the room, she said she had a look of impending doom, and I was like, yeah, I sure did, because I couldn't breathe, I couldn't get any air, I was suffocating, and it was over if somebody didn't do something. So they put me on the ventilator, and when they put me on the ventilator, I went to a village. My dad accompanied me to this village, and it was nothing. I've been to the tropics, I've been to the Caribbean, but I've never been anywhere that was anything like this village. And my dad had made arrangements with this powerful one, this all-powerful one that had the money and the power to make anything happen. And if he approved it, then he was going to fix me, and he was going to make me well. And I was really concerned about whether he would like me or not. But then I came to realize that it really didn't matter if he liked me, that I was important to him, and that was the only thing in the end that really mattered. And he did agree to get me fixed. So we waited, and it wound up a little while later. I realized I had a tube. I was on life support, and they had me tied down. But in the village, I had a plastic toy rattling in my chest, and a rope coming out of my nose. And the rope coming out of my nose, I thought they were attached in my chest, and that if somebody ripped them out, it was going to hurt really bad. But it was a feeding tube going down my nose through my esophagus, and I had the ventilator in my trachea, and the only orifice in my body that didn't have tubes in it was my ears. And I coded 3 times, they told me, during my 15-day stay on the ventilator. I don't remember coding other than the first time, but there was another moment where I was supposedly in President George Bush's wooden lodge, a log cabin lodge, and I was supposed to go there, but I truly believe that it's somewhere in my mind that maybe it was George Bush's lodge, but I truly believe that that was probably my home in heaven, or at least I certainly hope so, because it was completely peaceful. It was absolutely beautiful. It was gorgeous. Um, it was just it was phenomenal. There was nothing on this earth that could compare. And in this lodge, there was a Christmas tree, and it had all of the ornaments were completely white, but they were like snowflakes, and not a single one was exactly the same. But it's not anything that could ever be reproduced. There's no way I could describe it where anybody could understand how it looked. But they were just beautiful. They were fine. They were just precious. They're very fragile looking. Um, I had several other experiences in the village, but I think the most important thing um, was that I communicated with my parents and with my family, that they made it through to where I was. There was a huge tree in the village, and there was a road that the village was on a peninsula, and there was a road that intersected into a large highway on the mainland. I think the road on the peninsula was just the road for me to get around where I was, and that the highway was actually life. And at the intersection of the road on the peninsula and the highway, that was where the huge tree was located. And I think the tree symbolized the tree of life, because that's where I communicated with anyone who came to visit me. That's where I saw people, and nothing bad ever happened at the tree. And I go into a lot more detail about the tree and it's some experiences that that I had with family, and how things that were happening in the real world came through to where I was in this little village, because I was comprehending everything that was going on in life, even while I was completely unconscious. It was registering. Excuse me. Um, there was the reason I had mentioned the tornado on last week's show was because I questioned why. I so strongly questioned why God allowed me to live through that tornado. But now, after this experience, I was finally stable enough for them to do surgery, and they removed the blood clot. And there were people literally all over the world praying for me. 5 days after they did the surgery, I was out of ICU and in a private hospital room. They removed the softball-sized hematoma and 2 liters of congealed fluid that had been crushing my lung. And once they got all that stuff out of there, the surgeon told my parents, Dad said, well, give us an idea, just give us some idea. What kind of chance does she have? And the doctor looked at Dad and he said, I refuse to speculate. They had absolutely no hope, but nobody did at that point. I had infections going on other than the crushed lung and having to be on the ventilator. So they didn't have any hope, but they sure prayed. And I thank God every single day that I'm alive that they did, because the prayers worked. But one thing that I learned from this whole experience, and I went round up having to go to a rehab hospital. I stayed in rehab hospital for a week and then had to do outpatient rehab for several months. But the main thing that I learned, and as I said, in sharing the story about the tornado and questioning God, was that God left me with absolutely no doubt. I don't believe it was the sole purpose in this experience, and this illness, but He left me with absolutely no doubt about regarding purpose and why I'm here. Because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I am only here today by His grace and His mercy, and that He has a purpose for me, and that He has a purpose for my life. And that it doesn't matter if I understand what that purpose is, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter. It's not mine to question. That it's all His. I'm His. He is everything, and He's the giver. He's the giver of life. He granted me life. I'm only here, as I said before, because of His mercy and His grace. And I thought for many years, and when I was a child and a teenager and a young person, that God had some grand thing for me to do. That there was supposed to be, that I was supposed to go do something big, do something awesome, just hit it home, be famous, this, that, and the other. But I realized that that's not what it's all about. God's timing is absolutely perfect, and He is what it's all about. And it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what your situation is. It doesn't matter how sorry you feel for yourself or how bad you have it. As long as you put Him first, that is the only thing that He wants of us. That is all He asks of us, is that we keep Him first in everything we do, and that we consult Him first, that He's the first one that we go to. And He has, as I said, just perfect timing. Everything is, He has it all worked out. He had it all worked out before any of us were ever born, just like it tells us in the Bible. And having experienced what I did in the village, and having walked into His home, I literally walked into the big guy's house. I didn't go any further than the foyer, thank goodness, but I was there. And I've become so much aware of things that happen around me. And, Lynn and I were discussing earlier how when you put God first, that you see God in all things. I don't think I'm saying that exactly as it was mentioned when we discussed it, but I think actually you were the one that brought it up, Lynn. But that's all He wants from us. And everywhere we are, every moment of our lives is His perfect timing. We are where we are supposed to be. He knows it. He has it planned, and it's His. And we've just got to give it to Him. We've got to let Him have it and let Him take it. My husband divorced me last November, and that was extremely painful. I went through biblical counseling all summer while I was in rehab, and I did everything that I could possibly do to try to make the marriage work, but I don't think he could handle my health issues, and that was extremely difficult. But I'm dealing with that a lot better now. It has been excruciatingly painful. Excuse me. But God has a plan, and I know that He has the plan. If you look you don't even have to look for God. If you, I like to use the term, he stirs that big spoon, and he moves every person. He moves every person in and out of your life at the perfect time. He coordinates it. He stirs that big spoon, and you bump where you are supposed to. You are right where you are supposed to be every single moment if you allow him to have control. And you just have to live in that moment. No one is guaranteed tomorrow. No, there are no promises. There are no guarantees. The only guarantee that we have, and I know you hear this and see this on social media all the time, but until you've nearly lost your life, until you cannot breathe, until you have been to a point where you know you are at the point of no return, you really, I wasn't aware of a lot of things. I didn't wake up, even though I knew God. Excuse me. Even though I knew God, I didn't see him move the way that I now see him move. He is so amazing. I can't. He is so merciful, and he is so good. And just for the record, I do not think that tornadoes are truly acts of God. Tornadoes come from somewhere else. I truly don't think God instigated tornadoes. But he is so good. I cannot say enough. He has brought, as a result of this illness, he's brought so many people back into my life. It was like I lost one and I gained so many. I lost Joe, but then there have been so many people that returned to my life, even from the time I was 6 and 7 years old. And it's truly, every bit of it has been a blessing. And it was really scary. It was really physically uncomfortable. But I am so thankful. And I'm so grateful. And we need to try to remember to be grateful through everything that we experience. Because if we put him first and we allow him to have control, then there's a purpose. There's a purpose even in the pain, even though we don't understand it at the time. I still don't completely understand this. I still don't know what he wants me to do. I don't know what the big thing is. But I know as long as I live every day and I walk holding his hand, that's the main thing that he expects of me. That's what he expects of all of us. And our main purpose is to just serve him and keep him first in our lives. And he will provide. And his grace and his timing are perfect. The hardest thing, and I may get emotional, but the most difficult thing that I ever had to do in my entire life, the single hardest thing, was after I'd returned home from rehab. I was laying on my mother's couch. I was still in outpatient rehab at the time, and this was 2 or 3 weeks after I got out of the hospital. But the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, I laid there and I knew that I had to thank God for what was happening to me and what I was going through. And when I said that prayer, and I cried, I was crying out loud then when I said it. But I thanked God. Even though I didn't understand, I thanked him for what was happening. And
Do you know, I was released when I did that. And he has done nothing but continuously bless me since. And I pray that he blesses and that he protects and keeps each of you. I hope that no matter where you are or what your situation is, that you just keep your eyes on him, that you acknowledge him in all things, that he is your go-to God, not a go-to person, that you have a go-to God. He is accessible. You can talk to him. He wants you to share every detail, everything of your life. He wants you to own your sin. That's the only reason I shared last week what I did about the experimenting with drugs and things when I was in college. But God doesn't want us to be ashamed of our sin. We have to acknowledge our sin so that his glory can shine through. And if we don't acknowledge that sin, if we don't admit that sin, then how is he supposed to shine through? How is his glory supposed to show when you try to hide everything in a closet? But just keep him first. And Lynn, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share this time. And
I just wish we had more time. But real quick, before we have to go off there, tell them how to get your book. I See You from the Other Side by Tamatha Latham.
Yes.
Tell them how to get it.
You can find it on Amazon.com or CreateSpace.com. And it's I See You from the Other Side. And my last name is spelled Latham. I've got a mouthful of a name.
She does. She's got more letters in her name than we got time to say. Thank you, Tamatha. What a blessing. And just remember, like she said, no matter what you go through, keep him first, because he is the way through. Whatever storm you're facing, you may be in the middle of a battle right now, physically or spiritually, mentally, emotionally. You may be going through rejection. Whatever the pain is, whatever the source of it is, just call upon Jesus, because he truly, truly cares. And I encourage you to get this book, and I encourage you to pray for Tamatha, because I know God has a great work for her to do. And we're just going to agree and pray with her that it just comes into the open, clear as can be. Thank you for joining us today. And remember this, that out of everything you've heard us say here today, that when you understand and realize just how much Jesus Christ loves you and you accept him as your Savior, then you will experience your greatest defining moment. Oh, that was good.